We picture the samurai frozen in time, young, armored, sword drawn, ready to die for their lord at a moment's notice. But here's a question almost nobody asks. What happened when that warrior didn't die? What happened when a samurai simply got old? For centuries across feudal Japan, most samurai didn't fall in battle. They aged, their hands shook, their knees gave out, and an entire warrior culture had to adapt to that reality. It had to figure out what to do with men who could no longer fight. The answer is stranger than you'd expect. Far more structured, too. Let's start with a word most people have never heard. Inkyo. It means retired from public life. By the Edo period, roughly the 1600s onward, this was a formal, legally recognized status. A samurai didn't just quietly fade out. He filed for retirement. He handed over his headship to his heir, usually a son. His stipend and responsibilities went with it. The transfer was officially recorded in clan registers. Once Inkyo was granted, he was no longer head of his household. Not in the eyes of the law. He kept his name, his rank, sometimes even his sword. But his role in the world had changed completely. The age this happened at might surprise you. Retirement could come in someone's late 40s, sometimes their 50s. Not because they were considered elderly by then. Clans wanted capable young heirs running households while elders were still alive to guide them. An old samurai wasn't pushed out, he was repositioned, from warrior to advisor, and daily life changed to match that new role. A retired samurai often moved into a smaller residence within the family compound. He wore simpler clothing, lighter robes, no armor. He attended family meetings but didn't lead them. He was consulted, not commanded. His opinion carried weight precisely because he no longer held power. That combination of experience and detachment made him valuable in an entirely different way. That repositioning is where this gets interesting. Aging samurai didn't disappear into irrelevance. Many became teachers instead. Swordsmanship in Japan wasn't just combat. It was a lineage. Passed master to student, technique to technique, generation after generation. An old samurai with decades of fighting experience was, in a very real sense, a walking archive. Dozens of martial schools, or ryu, were founded or carried forward specifically by men in their later years. Men whose bodies had slowed down, but whose understanding of timing, distance, and strategy had only deepened. The body slowed down, the knowledge didn't. Take Miyamoto Musashi, the most famous case of all. He fought his first duel at 13. By his 20s, he'd already survived over 60 recorded combats. But the work he's actually remembered for wasn't written by that young duelist. It was the Book of Five Rings, written near the very end of his life in a cave when he was in his late 50s. His fighting days were essentially behind him. That strategy, studied by generations of swordsmen and later by business executives, didn't come from his fastest years. It came from his slowest ones. He's not the only example. Yagyu Munenori was another, a master swordsman who served 3 shoguns across his career. In his later years, he wrote the Heiho Kadensho, a treatise on sword strategy and the philosophy behind it. He was in his 60s when he finished it. Like Musashi, his most lasting contribution came after the fighting stopped. But not every aging samurai became a revered teacher. For many, old age was a quieter, harder negotiation. A samurai's entire worth was tied to his usefulness, to his service. So what happened when a man could no longer ride, no longer draw a bow, no longer hold a blade reliably? Some shifted into bureaucratic roles, managing accounts, training younger retainers, sitting on clan councils where judgment mattered more than reflexes. Others took Buddhist vows instead. It was extremely common for an aging samurai to shave his head and formally become a monk, sometimes while still living within the household, sometimes withdrawing to a temple entirely. This wasn't seen as defeat. Buddhist culture valued impermanence deeply. Stepping away from worldly combat to focus on the spirit was considered natural, even respected. A warrior who had spent decades facing death was considered well prepared for that kind of reflection. The temple wasn't an escape, it was a logical next step. And then, the harder reality underneath it all. Stipends were tied to rank, to active service. A samurai who retired too early could suffer for it. So could one whose heir mismanaged the transition. His family's income could shrink significantly. Clan registers from the period record real anxiety among elderly retainers about whether their households would be properly provided for. Some older samurai took on private tutoring roles to supplement their income, teaching calligraphy, poetry, or basic swordsmanship to merchant families who could afford to pay for a little prestige. For some, it was a quiet humiliation. For others, simply a practical solution. The warrior ideal promised honor. It didn't always promise comfort. There's a question almost nobody asks. What about samurai who grew old without rank, without recognition, the ones history simply never wrote down? For every Musashi who became a legend in retirement, there were thousands who didn't. Low-ranking retainers, aging quietly into obscurity. Their swords eventually sold, their stipends barely enough to survive on. Their stories never recorded anywhere, except a tax ledger listing one fewer mouth for the clan to feed. Most warrior traditions in history have no answer for what happens when the warrior survives. Feudal Japan built one anyway, a formal exit, a transfer of duty, a second purpose, as teacher, advisor, or monk. Old age wasn't the end of the samurai's story. For many of them, it was the only part of the story anyone bothered to write down. If you found this as fascinating as we did, hit subscribe. We dig up stories like this every week. And here's something to think about before you go. This culture built a structured, dignified path for warriors growing old. What does that say about how we treat aging and retirement today? Let us know in the comments.